Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is another webinar hosted by the Civil Affairs Association in partnership with the Military Police Regimental Association. I think the first of its kind and something that we should build on. My name is John McElligott, working with the Civil Affairs Association on the board of directors and helping out with the Eunomia Journal. So this is sponsored in part by the Eunomia Journal because this conversation led off by a paper that was published in Eunomia Journal by 3 officers. So I want to turn now to Mr. Rick Harn from the Military Police Regimental Association. Sir.
Well, good morning, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay, but sir, I appreciate the opportunity to join in this webinar with the Civil Affairs Association. This all sort of transpired by one of our previous regimental sergeant majors, Jeff Butler, who just really ranted and raved about the well done, the professional program that you guys laid out. So he asked me to reach out to John and sort of get involved with. So just want to take 3 to 5 minutes, and tell you a little bit about our association if you don't know. I will start with saying, given our website, and then I'll close probably with the same thing. So for those of you that's out there that's not familiar with us, if you go to www.mpraonline.org, again, mpraonline.org, we are the 501c3 nonprofit that does a lot of support and service to military police corps and their families. We sort of hang our hat on 3 of our legacy programs. I want to talk about one first. A lot of you military policemen out there, men and women, you certainly know what our Military Police Memorial Grove and our regimental walkway is. I don't have to, go too in depth with you on that, but we're very proud of that. It's a state-of-the-art area. It's a place where we have been able to, unfortunately, because of situations, had to honor our fallen military police. We have a regimental walkway there that is absolutely world class. We can honestly say today, with a lot of research and things over the years, that we have honored with a brick in our walkway of every military policeman that has ever died in combat, all the way back to the Civil War. And we're pretty proud of that. 4 statues encompass that grove, the cross pistols, the World War II that we've known to see on the Code of Ethics cards over the years, for those of you that are a little older. We have the March Say on Horseback, which is the print is right over my shoulders in our regimental room. And then just this year, we unveiled the first of its kind military working dog to honor that component of our regiment. So, the Grove tells its story in itself, and you can go over there at any time during the day. It don't matter what time of the year. There's people walking around. There's people paying honor and homage to, soldiers that they lost. It's just a really awe-inspiring place. And our second legacy program is our scholarship program. I'll take an opportunity to plug right now and let everyone know that scholarship opportunity is available on that website that I gave you earlier, mpraonline.org. That'll run through the March 31st. And we'll be giving in the vicinity of about $30,000 out this year to military police families, spouses, children. The policies online on our website that tells you the requirements for that, but $30,000, and we have given out hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarships over the years to our MP families. I'm very happy and proud of that, and especially in this day and age, a lot of people cutting back, and here we are. We're still in the crux of working the numbers, but it's going to be around $30,000. 2 years ago, we started a program with the Office of the Provost Marshal General and MPRA to award a scholarship to a Sergeant E5 through a Sergeant First Class, 1 a year. That scholarship is for active duty, Guard or Reserve, military police, $2,000, laptop computer, and sort of a traveling trophy. So this year's announcement is out, and you see it on our social media and also on our website. And then the third program is something that some of you leaders in the military police corps have benefited with, and over the years, is our Benevolent Fund. Don't have to tell any of you that sometimes we have soldiers that get themselves in a bad situation. Some of it is by no means their fault. Could be deaths in the family, and quite honest, some of the soldiers don't have money to help with things. We've paid for memorial service type travel, to flower arrangements, to helping get family members to a funeral. So we're very, very encouraged by that program. It's a tool that's leaders out there in the military police corps use simply as a brigade or a battalion level. Give me a call, and it's no red tape. We have 3 voting members of our board, and that process is turned around pretty fast. I know some of you have probably benefited for that with your soldiers over the years. So a lot of things to cover in certainly 3 to 5 minutes, but everything that I did tell you today is on that website, mpraonline.org. I would ask you to visit our social media. We have every platform that's imaginable. Miss Beth Bellerby, she puts out a quarterly magazine. So if you're a leader out there and you have something, we'll probably cover this webinar in our next magazine. So anything you can do. And lastly, we don't want to assume that we're doing everything perfect. We're not thin-skinned. We're all professionals. If you have some things as a leader that you think, hey, have you guys ever thought of this? Have you ever looked at this? There's probably a high probability we have. But at the same time, we don't want to just always accept the status quo. And, it's just a great opportunity. You can send Beth an email, myself an email. Our emails are listed on the website, and it's just really a collaborative effort between us and all organizations. And very fortunate today that we're able to be a part of this webinar. John, I certainly thank you for your professionalism and making sure that in our technology age that Beth and I had all the resources that we needed to execute this. So again, thank you for your time. Most importantly, thank you for your service to the nation. We live in a sort of a crazy and bizarre time right now, but you know what? We'll come out on the other side better for it. So again, sir, thank you for your time.
Amen, sir. Thank you very much. Really glad to have the MP Regimental Association here. And at this point, I want to turn this to retired Colonel Joe Curlin, who is the president of the Civil Affairs Association, for his remarks. Sir?
Well, good morning. Thanks, everyone, for participating in this event, special event, Carpe Diem. I would like to thank John McEllicott. John actually got this program started about 5 years ago, along with Dennis Cahill down at Fort Bragg. And the importance of this program is to get information out concerning civil affairs, but also concerning other areas that civil affairs is involved in. This program is only one of many programs that we have as far as the educational program. Our 3 goals is to educate, to advocate, and to motivate and actuate. We're a little bit different than some of the other associations because we're smaller. And so we have to do a little bit more in order to get the word out about civil affairs. Many of you may know that Civil Affairs was co-located at Fort Gordon in Georgia with the military police many years ago when the branch was instituted. And the MP and the Civil Affairs, we actually had functional specialties in the MP branch, which actually, in working with the design of civil affairs after the Second World War, was very instrumental in getting to those areas that were most important for winning in competition and conflict and back to competition. Along with this program that John designed, we also have our programs as far as our roundtables, symposium, our journal, and our interactive website, which is www.civilaffairsassoc.org. Over the last 4 years, we've actually incorporated between the active and the reserve a program which has been forward-thinking, but also a program that engages other people outside of civil affairs. This has propelled us to lead the field. I also want to send a shout out to Chris Holshek and also to Arnold David, who have been very instrumental in getting the word out. If you don't have, or you never have participated in our symposium and roundtables, please take the time to go onto our site and look at these programs. In the spring. We have our roundtable, and as part of this, we have our writing program, which people participate with their ideas in order to help the military and civil affairs move forward in the challenges that we face. I'd also give special thanks to our commanders here today, Colonel Meyer and also Colonel Saylor, taking their time out of their busy schedule. I know when I was commander, there was always a number 99 on your list that you had to get done, and this may be around 52 today for you. So thanks for all you do for our Army today. In talking about engagements, the three things that we look at as far as our education, our advocacy, and then also our motivation. As far as the programs and the mission of our major goals, in the process, we're doing a great job educating, and we'll continue to do that. The advocacy program is, since we are a small branch, we need to reach out and touch people in the whole society, not just in the military, but other branches, and also the Department of Defense and governmental organizations, State Department, Homeland Security, NGOs, and business and communities. Our main goal is that, and when we got started, is we have to work with civilians, and that can alleviate the burdens that the commander has. And I can tell you for a fact that many times during the years, civil affairs was thought of as something that, okay, we'll choose up and we'll bring civil affairs. But we've advanced, we've gotten into programs and development of civil affairs over the years. And as the branch grows in the future, we have interacted with different people in the military and civilians in order to get this done. The military, actually when they formed the branch, they were after the Second World War. The experiences of the Second World War in Japan and also Europe really set the stage to get civil affairs going. And when I say get us going, they were brilliant enough to understand that this branch would serve as a silent but a lethal type of system. This is why this career field, MOS, had the 31 career field added as an additional skill identifier. I can give you one example. A civil affairs officer, Colonel Wendell Rich, was a 31. He was actually the head of the police department in Philadelphia, the training police department. And when he left civil affairs, he took over an MP unit. And that MP unit ran the largest POW camp during Desert Storm. And I know Wendell very well, and he's a very good friend. And he told me, he said, some of the things that I learned in civil affairs as a MP officer were very helpful in running that POW camp. We've also worked with the military police during refugee operations in Eglin Air Force Base and the 3 bases that were opened, and also during the early 90s with the Haitians, early 92 and 94. And the military police were very instrumental in providing security for the camps. So the third area that we've engaged in is our writing program. And this is part of our legacy program that we've developed. The writing program gives awards to those who do scholarly writing. We have a Glock program also that we have given out Glocks this year for those exceptional writers. We also have instituted, like the military police there, a scholarship program. This will be a first for us in engaging fallen warrior families and providing scholarships in the future for those families. We have taken over the Regimental Awards program in helping Fort Bragg, and thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Sue Gannon, who's taken on that responsibility. She's doing a great job in getting these awards out to our units and our members, both active and reserve. In this third area of a responsibility to motivate people, we're using these programs to motivate people to come grow with us, but also mentoring CA leaders in the future to add programs and bring ideas to us in order that we can keep this branch growing and being successful. One thing about us which makes us as unique is the functional specialties, and these functional specialties will be in the future enabling us to participate in the initial CCC criterion of the Army and the Department of Defense. Civil Affairs is one of the few branches that has the responsibility and growing requirements in competition, conflict, and back to competition. So what I'd like to do today is to thank everyone that has contributed to this program, and to also say that in the future, as we grow and as we interface with other branches in doing the missions, that the Civil Affairs Association will continue to support the Army. And as our military diplomats grow, we will help them grow in our support. So thanks again, John, and all the leadership on board. Secure the victory, and let's get at it.
Sir, thank you very much. Thanks for those remarks and your leadership with the Civil Affairs Association. I just want to give some admin notes and then sort of tell you what's going to happen today, and then turn this over to our next speaker, Major Mike Carlson. If you have questions, please add them in the Q&A section, the tool that's at the bottom of your screen. If you have comments, you can put them in the chat. If you have links to share or other ideas that you have, please add them in there. But the questions should go in the Q&A. This is being recorded, and we do expect that you respect other people and follow proper decorum. If you're not doing so as an attendee, then we have the right to kick you out. So please behave. Mike Carlson, a major in the Army, is co-author of the article that he and two other officers wrote, Major Chris Tuning and Major Joshua David. He's also serving on the editorial board for the Eunomia Journal, and that is where we had published the article that they co-wrote. If you have something that you'd like to share, whether you're Civil Affairs or MP, or you're just listening from interagency or some other branch of the military, please consider that as an option. It's a great digital magazine. We have short articles that go in what's called the team room. Then we have longer articles that you can publish as well. And those are eligible for the awards that Colonel Carlson had just mentioned. So it's my great opportunity now to introduce Major Mike Carlson. Sir, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you could start talking about your paper and introduce your co-authors. Thank you.
Hey, great. Thanks a lot, John. And thanks again to the Civil Affairs Association and Military Police Regimental Associations for co-hosting this. I'm Major Mike Carlson. I'm currently serving as a Civil Military Operations Chief in the 83rd Civil Affairs Battalion. And I'm honored to briefly discuss the paper Civil Affairs and Military Police in Large-Scale Combat Operations that I co-authored with Majors David and Tuning. Where we're at today as far as this webinar, to be quite honest, started over a conversation. I think, as I recall, it was over a box of Domino's pizza at a JRTC rotation. It was towards the end, and at that point, it was really just myself, Major David, and Major Tuning, sharing our experiences and asking each other what our take on JRTC was and what kind of our thoughts were on large scale combat operations. I was particularly interested in Major David's take. I had not had much professional exposure to military police prior to, and the fact that the 83rd Civil Affairs Battalion is underneath a military police brigade made it all the more interesting and contextually relevant. So as Josh, Chris, and I were talking, that conversation of initial curiosity grew to mutual interest in writing something. At that point, it was just a white paper. Hey, here's what we talked about, and here's some ideas. And that eventually grew into the paper that we published on Eunomia Journal. And then the Civil Affairs Association reached out for this webinar. So thank you to, again, both associations for hosting this. I think it's important to note up front before the in-depth conversation that our paper and our argument is really based on one JRTC rotation. It was based on our experiences at the Combat Training Center. We all know that any training environment, even the best ones, will never replicate reality. So certainly there's room for this argument to grow, and ultimately we're all just having a conversation, and that's how things should progress. And so that was really what started the conversation, but certainly a lot more to discuss and talk about. There is value in having the conversation, because I think at the end of the day, we all might be surprised to learn that there's people that we see and interact with on a daily basis that are trying to solve and get after similar problem sets. Not having the conversation, I think, puts us at a risk of missing the solution, so to speak, to try to find answers. We all have answers that we need to find every day on a daily basis, and they're urgent and they're kind of the problems of today. But when we take time to discuss these things with other people, we take time to publish and write, I think that puts us collectively at an institutional level in a better place to get after solutions. And solutions, in my opinion, mitigate and best case scenario, even prevent the problems we might see tomorrow. So again, huge honor for my small part in this and ability to participate. I'll pass it off to my co-authors. I'll be followed by Major Joshua David. Thanks again.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Major Josh David, Chief of Training from the 16th MP Brigade. First off, I want to appreciate the intellectual curiosity from Mike about the MP challenges and the trends during the exercise. So I'll jump right into it. So the best way to explain in the article what the MPs were doing during the exercise, we were basically testing a new concept for the MP Battalion Tactical Action Center, which is the MP TAC for the battalion. So the concept to fulfill a security gap in that support area to mitigate enemy activity, because they were having challenges with the BSB and for the brigade combat team to limit those threats and disrupt our actions and freedom of maneuver. So, which is another command and control node to assist the brigade engineer battalion, the BEB, to secure that support area. And we also provide an MP company to conduct the route security throughout the aerial operations while the brigade engineer battalion was focusing on that engineer assets. So for the close fight and setting up offensive and defensive obstacles for counter mobility and survivability. So another challenge we identified during that exercise was the fact that MP companies can only defeat level 2 threats. And so the workaround they found in that exercise was getting issued a javelin and was trained up on the spot to use it in the support area to defeat those level 3 threats if they come across. More importantly, the lesson learned on developing in that rotation was developing those strong command and support relationships with the brigade combat team and with the BEB. It's essential to support them with that unified effort in that consolidation area or support area to help sustain and shape those operations and synchronize all our efforts. So that was a challenge for the MP Battalion TAC and for the BEB so that we can synchronize everything. For the CA and MP partnership, it could expand in the consolidation area from the article we were discussing that we wrote. There are opportunities that CA could assist with MPs with their mission sets. For instance, during the JRTC rotation, our MPs platoons had some key engagements with the city mayor and police chief in small towns in the cities. The civil affairs teams can be gainfully employed and leveraged to help develop those intelligence and understand the enemy's information operations campaign there. And then another example that I can go off of is the MPs required some assistance for internally displaced persons, IDPs. Luckily, there was a civil affairs team there from the reserve component, and they were able to assist IDPs and talk to them and find out what's going on inside the towns. And then the civil affairs teams coordinate transportation to the nearest IDP camp for those IDPs. Then for also, there are more opportunities to integrate CA and MPs together beyond the JRTC exercises or CTC rotations in the real world, while working with host nation police force and developing those strong civil engagements. This will enhance our as a force multiplier and create that integrated security force in the consolidation or support areas and support the fight. Those are just a few examples that CAMPs can build stronger relationships and partnerships for LISCO and support the BCTs and divisions. That's just the gist of it, of what we discussed, and create that discussion and follow on for everyone to discuss. I'll hand it over to Chris to share the CA side of the discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. Good morning. My name is Major Chris Tuning, and I'm a CMOC Chief in Echo Company, 83rd Civil Affairs Battalion. The role of civil affairs in large-scale combat operations is an ongoing topic of discussion within the Civil Affairs branch. During my brief with Lieutenant Colonel Salyer, he stated it was his highest priority and a question that needs an answer, particularly because the 83rd Civil Affairs Battalion occupies a unique space between the SOF and reserve components of our branch. The 83rd Civil Affairs Battalion is the primary stopgap for the CRIF, formerly the GRF, and be the primary conduit of civil affairs support to general purpose forces, while the bulk of our CA capability in the reserves has the opportunity to mobilize. Therefore, it's essential to understand the role and where CA best supports the Army and Joint Forces in future operating environments. With this in mind, the 83rd Civil Affairs Battalion participated in this JRTC rotation to test the experimental concept of embedding CA forces with the cavalry. CA forces have a mandate to conduct civil reconnaissance, which is being considered as the 6th form of reconnaissance, and it just made sense to test the concept of conducting civil affairs activities on the forward line of troops, or as close as we could get to that. During the preparation for this rotation, we understood there would be challenges in this role. One of the role-induced challenges would be the significant trade-off between civil engagement and civil reconnaissance in our conceptual role. As we were choosing to emphasize the civil reconnaissance role over the civil engagement role, which we assumed would be limited to hasty engagements. Additionally, we anticipated issues with integration efforts. Inclusion of the cavalry security plans could limit utilization opportunities, since security requirements on the FLOT supersede the perceived benefits of conducting civil engagement beyond tactical control points. Unfortunately, this leaves our CATs tied to these critical security positions. Other operational challenges we experienced were limited freedom of maneuver due to the size of our elements and difficulty with communications integration. The CA elements embedded with CAV required security elements to relocate our CATs to better support the BCT with displaced civilians, thus robbing the CAV and other supported units of combat power to facilitate our movement. Communications were a challenge because of the TOC jumps, the vertical integration of information through Joint Battle Command Platform became more difficult later in the rotation as the maintenance and other weather kind of broke those aspects down. In essence, there were a number of lessons learned during this rotation. Primarily, the degree of complexity increases the closer we embed our CA teams to the FLOT. Freedom of maneuver, communications, access to specific CA analytical systems, and the role of civil affairs as an integrated security partner at the nexus of the close and support areas. There's opportunities there. This is why we believe there was potential in exploring a closer collaboration between MP and CA regiments. We shared similar challenges and opportunities in the CTC environment, particularly in the consolidation area, which correlates to that doctrinal concept of the maneuver enhancement brigade in the further rear echelons. We look forward to furthering the conversation and tackling these collective problem sets in these areas together. So with that, I'll just turn it back to Mike.
Hey, great. Thanks a lot, Chris, Josh. Again, really appreciate it. At this point, it's my honor and to pass it over to Major Ian Duke. He's going to facilitate the moderated discussions between Lieutenant Colonel Salyer and Colonel Myers. Shout out to Major Ian Duke here. He's put a lot of work into setting up this moderated discussion and framing out these questions. So really appreciate it, Ian, and passing it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Should I shut right back to you because I know that you put the bulk of the energy into making innovative stuff like this happen. So it's excellent. So this is my privilege to moderate and facilitate a brief and hopefully fruitful discussion between the commander of the 16th MP Brigade and the commander of the 83rd Civil Affairs Battalion. I should start with I'm Major Ian Duke, commander within the 83rd Civil Affairs Battalion, Fox Company. And with that, sir, I'd like to hand it over to Colonel John Myers to offer a brief introduction before I hand it over to Colonel Salyer. Thanks, sir.
Hey, thanks, Ian. Colonel John Myers, current commander of 16th Military Police Brigade here at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Just real quick, I entered the service in Germany, 2 tours in the Balkans, had some CA touch points, especially in Sarajevo, kind of going into 99, various touch points with 7th Army's Reserve CA, off and on doing military police duties in Germany, up through 2000, tours at Fort Bragg, Hawaii, Korea, Germany, of course, Fort Polk, and then 4 tours in Iraq. Particular to CA interactions with military police, it was pretty heavy in 04 and 05 in Iraq. But I think that's where you got a lot more of a multi-compo flavor. And quite frankly, as I've discussed with some of the 83rd majors, it was a little bit different focus than today under LISCO. So I guess, from my perspective, I have had a lot of touch points in Iraq specifically. As a company commander, stood up the first Iraqi Highway Patrol Academy in North Babel province, south of Baghdad there, which eventually Anbar and the Marines had really heavily adopted even up through the end of Operation New Dawn in 2011. Other tours in Iraq as an S3 and M&D North during the surge, had multiple touch points with Iraqi police academies in Diyala province, as well as the Mosul Public Service Academy, which I helped stand up in 03 with heavy CA support and some military police detachment support coming out of the National Guard. And then we reconstituted that in 2008 as part of the General Petraeus at that time, focused on Earth Police. The last tour in 11, shutting down OND, part of 18th Airborne Corps staff and the G35 Future Operations cell. Not as much, but you could still see echoes of a lot of those programs that have gone on. So I guess operationally, between the Balkans and Iraq over a span of 12 years or so, I think I've had a lot of touch points. More recently, 2016 with the Warfighter, 16th participated in with I-Corps. There were some CA MP linkages there, but it really wasn't codified as it is today under the current doctrinal framework with LISCO, which we then did execute and kind of rehearse in conjunction with the 18th Airborne Corps this last fall for Warfighter 21.1 in October. And that's where we really get to see a lot more of, contemporary 83rd CA, 16th MP Brigade, and then 18th Airborne Corps SACP type integration, of which 83rd in particular had provided some CA expertise to both the brigade and the Corps. SACP fighting the rear area. So I guess that's just kind of the perspective I bring at this point. So kind of to earlier comments, MPs that I grew up with before functional areas were a thing, did a lot of time over in PsyOps and CA as part of that 04 broadening. Of course, that's not the case anymore, but it just was a pretty habitual relationship, especially for MPs here at Fort Bragg, because of the nexus of active duty CA and PsyOps. So that's just kind of my background. Thanks again.
Hey, thanks, sir. I appreciate that, amplifying that. I just wanted to take one step back before I hand it over to Colonel Salyer for an introduction, is that you hit on a lot of the themes there. Part of the purpose of this, or the main purpose of this, is to generate a better understanding between MPs and CA and how we not only understand each other, but work together. and then our particular motivations, and then perhaps where we're going into the future. So you mentioned a lot of stuff that I think has a lot of current history that's building on what we're doing today. So as I hand it over here to Colonel Salyer for him to introduce himself, Sir Colonel Salyer, if you could, at the end of your introduction, if you could begin with a little bit of background about just how the 83rd Civil Affairs Battalion came to fall under the 16th MP, because I know from a listener's point of view to this podcast or webinar, there's two main parts of civil affairs. There's your UC KPOC folks, which is the bulk of the forces, and then there's your 95th Civil Affairs Brigade folks, and we're kind of a bridge in between all of that. So and when we're seeing here that this isn't just an accident that we ended up in this position. So sir, over to you for an introduction. Thanks, sir.
Hey, Ian. Yeah, thanks much for that. And I'll say first off to John McGillicuddy and Mr. Harn at the MPRA, the Civil Affairs Association, also Colonel Retired Carlson. Thanks much for your efforts in getting this thing together. And also to the three authors that kind of initiated this discussion with your work and kind of your feedback from the latest JRTC rotation. I certainly appreciate it. I think it's a good discussion. I think this is a good start point, but I also recognize this is just a start point where we've got a lot of ground to cover to continue the discussion. So a little bit of my background. First off, I don't have near as much experience with military police as Colonel Myers has with civil affairs. Until very recently, I hadn't really worked with military police too much. But I was commissioned as a field artillery lieutenant. I was a platoon leader in the MLRS battalion. Then I was an assistant S3 and a fire direction officer for that battalion. Came over to civil affairs in 2006. That pipeline's a year long, just about, give or take a few months. And from there, my team leader time was in the 98th, but I did my team leader time in at least the rotation was in support of OEF Trans-Sahel. So in Northwest Africa and Mauritania. So that was my first rotation as a team leader. From there to 3rd Battalion, 7th Group as a Battalion S9, a couple of operational rotations to Afghanistan and RC North, RC West, and then RC Capital, and then one rotation to Central America. And then from there over to the 81st Civil Affairs Battalion, which was a subordinate of 85th Civil Affairs Brigade. And I'll kind of get into the history of that Major Duke kind of discussed. But while I was there, I was briefly in a Civil Military Operations Center, OIC, and then company commander and another rotation to Afghanistan. And then I was a Battalion S3. So, Ian, you brought up kind of how we came to be here, how the 83rd came to be here. And we were subordinate to the 85th Civil Affairs Brigade, which was stood up at Fort Hood, I think 2011. And I was there at the time. I was actually in the 81st Civil Affairs Battalion, as I mentioned, when it came to be in 2011, 2012. And I think it was the total Army analysis 2015, 2016, when the 85th and 4 of its subordinate battalions made or showed up on the 1 to end divestment list, which means they were some of the units that were set to be divested in the Army as the Army was kind of doing a restructure. And I think at that time that the 83rd, the 83rd was the only battalion that remained, and they took on a lot of the missions that the other battalions that were deactivated from the 85th had. So the 83rd originally had a CENTCOM focus, but it ended up being, focused like a global focus with one company, as we are now in the IRF. I think the original construct was that we fell under the 20th Engineer Brigade, but then later under the 16th MP Brigade. As Colonel Meyer said, I think at the time that switch was made from the Engineer to the MP Brigade, the MP Brigade commander had some time as a functional area. He was assigned in the functional area as civil affairs. So that was kind of personality based. It worked out at the time. I'll say, it continues to work for us. So we fall under 16th MP Brigade for admin, logistics, all functions, and it's really working well for us at this time. So that's kind of the history of it. I hope that covers it all. Over.
Hey, sir. Yeah, that gets right to the heart of it. And here we are. As Colonel Myers noted, we've been working together with MPs forever, at least since World War II, as we heard from the associations before as well. And then doctrinally, 3-57.10, population resource control, we're both written very heavily into that. And just noting that, because I wanted to hit on that primarily because the 16th MP, when you walk through that building, you see all those pictures from 1966 on, walking down that hallway. And ours, we have about 4 or 5 pictures on the wall, but yet there's still a lineage that goes back a significant distance. So just on that, drawing some analogies from history, Colonel Myers, sir, you talked about how you've had you're working with CAs, especially after, and you could even rely on the Balkans there for peace, but especially after the Iraq, it took about 6 months from my reading for really them to start putting police information and civil information into the intelligence processes so we could figure out who was who on the battleground or in the battle space or in the AO in general. And if you could draw parallels of that and the differences you're seeing between now and say a warfighter now, because those are the things I think our soldiers today are running into, perhaps how whether or not, because it seems like it was a little bit ad hoc and we were building the plane in flight, so to speak. You heard that analogy so many times in the early 2000s, but now we're working towards getting something a little bit more effectively in place.
Right, Ian. I think I got the gist of it. So, and this is my experience, so I'm sure others will agree or disagree. So I was in Iraq in 03, 04, 05. 03 was up in Mosul on battalion staff for taking company command, and then company command was 04 and 05 south of Baghdad and Kalzu, which is kind of about 50 clicks south of Bayop. And then if you ever heard of the Sunai triangle of death that the Marines coined for Al-Skandaria, going up to Mamadou and then over to Salman Pak. It was in that area. So, in 03, I saw pretty tight coordination with CA, and most of these would be, reserve compo. I don't think there was any active back then, right? And, the skill set, much like National Guard and military police forces, you get a wide variety, and a lot of it is technical and very good, quite frankly. And I think this goes to the larger effort, that we did in 03, 04, 05 as an Army in Iraq. Is just there's a skill set versus security environment mismatch. And what I mean there is much like a lot of the civilian police that we had hired to come in to help us augment standing the Iraqi security forces back up. We have a lot of heavy hitters, very knowledgeable people up front, but that wasn't the right time. We still needed to get the security environment secure before we brought that in. So we kind of reversed what we were supposed to do. And I draw a parallel as a 3 in 07, 08 during the surge. I had, CPAT, civilian police augmentees that, quite frankly, deputy sheriffs that somebody wanted to get out of their county and were low level. I could get the same thing out of an E5 MP versus, in 04 as a company commander, I had, highway state police troop commanders, people that were like actual administrators in police forces, but nothing was set right condition wise to allow them to actually be able to do what they needed to do. So that's kind of the skill set mismatch. And I think CA had maybe some of the same problems, in 04, especially, a lot of the CA projects we'd help with security escorts or actually, direct liaison with villages in the surrounding area, at least around Kalzu, was, let's put in wells, schools, those kind of things. But it did no good because as soon as you put in, they were blown up. Right. And that kind of goes okay, when we go into that kind of, and I don't want to just harbor on Iraq, but it still goes back to anytime we go into a LISCO situation where you have a functional government that is shattered or forced underground due to combat operations, the vacuum that is created, if there's allowed to have any kind of insurgency or at least, paramilitary by an opposing near peer threat that disrupts local governance, there's got to be the security first. And that's been a big, probably something you saw if you do any kind of research in Iraq in particular. And again, my experience in Iraq, I'm not getting in Afghanistan because I think it's a little bit different dynamics in terms of a functional government that collapsed in Iraq versus probably not as functional in Afghanistan. So with that parallel, if you go into like Europe or maybe another near peer theater, what does fill that vacuum? And you've got to have a security focus first, because whatever you do effort wise on the governance piece will just, be a point of friction or something that can be exploited by an enemy force. And does that kind of answer your question, Ian?
Sure. Yeah, yes, it does. In
Or
fact,
whoever asked that question.
yeah, right. Well, we're just going to lay out small groundwork, and then we'll dig into questions as they come in from the audience. As new soldiers today, and you with your significant Iraq experience, we're seeing a whole new generation of folks with no combat experience. And then Colonel Salyer, significant Afghanistan experience. So what we're finding is that as we talk about like an article like this, a new soldier will see an article and then try and position troops within, our CTC rotations and or in competition. So with that, and if I just one more question to you, Colonel Myers, it's about the support area command post, the SACP, and then we can transition to Colonel Salyer and the differences between that and a CMOC, perhaps, and how that came to be. Because I know at the beginning, at least, it was ad hoc, and there'd be different things that we were trying different experiments, and now we're continuing to experiment, but we're looking to get something a little bit more defined in these roles. So I guess, Colonel Myers, to you, the question is are we finding success with this support area command post SACP concepts or in bringing troops to our two capabilities together?
Okay, Ian. So I think, I didn't mean to cut you off, but okay. So I think it's 3.94 division and corps level operations, FM. I've seen the draft, which came out before Warfighter 21.1, and things like rear area was coming back versus consolidation area as a thing that's not is much more focused now into an actual little bitty area than it was during the SACP initial discussion. So within that, the doctrinal development that is going to come out from the Army, I think that'll help define a lot of the SACP. And if you look at like 18th Airborne Corps, for example, the SACP is not really defined on their toe. And that goes to they had to get the doctrine first with the division and corps level operations within their LISCO and how they're going to handle that rear area, for lack of a better vernacular. But you can just kind of interpose SACP, rear area, support area, consolidation area into one jumble right now. And when that doctrine comes out for corps and division operations, that will probably end up driving any kind of theater considerations under LISCO, then also, kind of shape, what entities go into that rear area under that new doctrine for division and corps to fulfill the security, governance, whatever other functionality comes out. So I think that's going to be kind of an evolutionary development coming over here probably over the next 18 months as CAC continues to refine that. A lot of that, though, is predicated on lessons learned from the corps that are coming through the warfighters and feeding in that doctrinal, cycle with lessons learned and TTPs. And one of that would be the SACP and its construct. So, 18th Airborne Corps for Warfighter 21.1 had a distinct support area command post, led up by the Deputy Commanding General of 18th Airborne Corps, Major General Kraft. But there's automatic tension because, the SACP has to focus on SACP stuff to enable the Corps. And then in this case, in Warfighter 21.1, which is the largest warfighter they've ever attempted with 4 participating divisions, the SACP has to allow them to generate combat power, allow them to generate and sustain tempo, momentum, and those kind of things to enable the Corps to fight operationally. So there's a distinctness between what do you do nested within core operations or division supporting operations, or things that are just specifically focused on things going on in the SACP. Does that kind of make a sense as an AO versus a larger operational understanding of what's going on for the Corps? And the reason I highlight that is because, those that end up in the SACP kind of have to diverge their focus areas. One, you have to be tied in with what the Corps is doing, right? And this has always been a struggle for any of the Corps separates, MPs, signal engineers that span both the Corps rear or their general, areas that aren't covered by a division. And then how do you enable the division's support based on the Corps' prioritization of resources and effort, et cetera. So, the personnel in there are kind of, a foot on one side and a foot on the other, because you have to focus on the SACP enable things. But at the same time, you have to have an eye on what's going on at the big macro level. And I think that's probably some of the manning and talent management that's have to be continually evolved in the SACP or whatever the, rear area command post, whatever they end up calling it at the end state for the cores in particular. And I focused on cores because that's really where you start getting the elements of operational art, is that headquarters that spans, high level tactical operations of the division headquarters up to a theater army, where you're really getting much more into operational or strategic type foci. And that's where I think, much like most corps struggle with, is how do I man my man my main command post, assault command post, mobile command post, and then, a SACP rear, whatever it ends up being called doctrinally down the road. So just kind of understand that, there's that macro micro tension in that headquarters, because a lot of the enablers aren't going to have a division, right? And if you're going to do an economy of force, which is what 18th did with us in Warfighter 21.1, where you had an MEB, an MP brigade, and then later an IVCT trying to wage the consolidation area, support area, rear area as it grew to tie into the division rears as they bounded towards the flot. There's just inherent tensions in there, and how do you manage that while maintaining focus? Because really the SACP should be able to become an alternate command post if the main is taken out and targeted by long range precision fires, for instance. So they have to have enough common operating picture with what the core, main battle area, deep area, security zone fights are happening at the same time maintaining the SACP. And I think that's where they really, you'll see headquarters struggle with. And that's where you end up with brigades like ours are just like, hey, here's your mission. What do you need? Go do it. And don't really tell me any issues, right? Does that kind of set the stage, Ian?
Yeah, that's a ton. And so I can turn it over to Colonel Salyer and just ask him, because on the part you're talking so much about putting military elements together, the vast majority of our mission is reaching out and bringing the civilian or the civilian considerations into that, usually through CMOC type mechanisms. So Colonel Salyer, I'll put that to you. If you see that, because we talk about large scale combat operations, and largely sometimes civil considerations get left to the last question. Even Major General Kraft, when he was here, mentioned they left phase 4 off the table a little bit until the very end. But they didn't get into it because perhaps there's too many factors. However, that is to say, the shock of large-scale combat operations are going to require so much civil engagement. So, Colonel Salyer, I was just wondering if you had thoughts on how you would see CMOC perhaps at echelon and the 83rd's role in that, or just CA's role in that, sir. Over.
Yeah, definitely. First off, I'll kind of get after, I think the first question you posed to Colonel Myers, and you want to really just agree there, that absolutely conducting area security is preeminent, and I concur. I think it's even doctrinally sound. It's in all the doctrine, FM 3-0, among others, area security before stability tasks. But just to kind of get after the partnership that the authors were talking about between MP and civil affairs, I think there's a role for civil affairs in area security with military police. And I think that would be, among other things, just to detect things like human relationships and to report on things like human relationships and power dynamics and cultural factors and the things that aren't like quickly, perceived by others with other types of mission sets. So that's just kind of my take on it. But I'm sorry, Ian, I kind of whiffed past your question. What was it again? You're on mute.
From particularly the CA perspective, tying in through to the SACP through the CMOC lens at echelon, which would be, there's a CMOC at the division, the corps, at the various different levels, as being kind of an adjunct to it.
Right. I think absolutely necessary. And that's a good point. And it depends really at the echelon where they're established. And, so I'd like to get your take, Ian. What do you think?
Well, actually, just in conversation with Colonel Myers yesterday, I thought it was interesting when he talked about his experience in Mosul, where they had set up a command post, and then there was a CMOC right next door, and it seems that that's where we can get some kind of like a filter of the civilian way into things, and it's going to have to happen fast in Lisco. But so with that, I think it's a good transition to talk about. Because there's a couple questions out there, and a couple questions that were given from our folks, and it's taking a step back a little bit. Is a warfighter and CTCs are one way to do this. Is that what's another way we perhaps could work together to understand each other a little bit more and be able to work to come together with formations that may be able to be effective in the into preparation for large-scale combat operations. What I mean, I guess, is outside of the training model, are there outside of those major training models, are there other opportunities we may have to work together?
I think a big part of that is just what we're doing on the installation right now. I mean, communication, getting our just making sure our systems talk and going to ranges together and finding out, exactly what we're about, which, this forum right here is kind of getting after that. So I think that's kind of a basic foundational level of one way just to introduce that. Okay.
And I guess the more difficult question is that given that large scale combat operations may be here, may not be here for another 10 years, or, we always anticipate that it's coming. Given that we're in a competition phase, in planning for this type of thing, we use training as an example. Is there possible ways that we could work together and kind of revitalize that PSYOP, MP, CA working together in the competition phase? And I'll put that out to either of you, gentlemen, perhaps even through the SFAB lens. It could be a method for working these various ideas together, sir.
Hey, Ian, I'll just jump in. So, we've been sending MP battalion TACs. Our second iteration's coming up with 382 and 503rd. And I think with the way they're integrating in the BCT to kind of handle that rear area at that level, and granted, let's just be frank, it's going to be very rare BCTs to get that level of support, but it's really the only thing we can actually drive any kind of lessons learned in a tactical environment is the CTCs. Eventually, if the Army continues to go forward with the division TACs being involved in those, and that would maybe allow us to actually uptick to the proper echelon, which is a battalion and a DSGS, or, if our FDU on the MP side goes through, assigned to a division and kind of take that security fight on. And that's where I would see a lot of CA and PSYOPs integration in with military police under the auspices of supporting that division or BCT as a main effort to kind of leverage those skill sets within those specific areas over a period of time. And to that end, that's, I think, the best way to test the mechanics of it. When you start talking about phase zero, competition, you're right. SFABs, the RAF missions that we do in the company or battalion level, for AFRICOM and those kind of economy of force theaters in particular, I think are, a way. I know the UCOM elements at 83rd do integrate with 21st TSC, 18th MP Brigade, forward deployed in Germany, for instance, and that's probably more of the, near peer phase zero, at least in the UCOM area. I'm not as sure as what PACOM would look like based on geography and where forces are actually positioned. Understanding infrastructure is completely different between Europe and the Pacific, unless you're in a built-up area or metropolitan area or a country like Korea or South Korea where you got a pretty good infrastructure network. So I think that's just some things you can do. To echo Colonel Salyer's point. Yeah, integration. I mean, it did make sense because I was the deputy brigade commander when we looked at taking 83rd under 16th before I went to Navy War College, and it did make sense because there is a lot of connective tissue there. And kind of your earlier point, it depends on the security environment. If host nation forces are working, operational, and not, subject to graft or corruption that would be counter to U.S. coalition force objectives, then absolutely a CA team doing human terrain mapping, intel feeds that allow security forces either with a heavy or light MP coordination, kind of between CA and MP doing those coordination missions for the host nation to support our efforts. Absolutely, that's what we want, right? And if you look at the warfighter, depending on where you're at in time, space, in the battlefield, Polish forces would be very much taking a lot of that stuff that we, because they don't assimilate in the warfighter, had to do as MPs because it just came down to somebody had to do it to facilitate the game. So I think that's some of the planning considerations, and it's going to go back to that continuum of operations on where do we apply CA or MP efforts based on robust host nation support versus maybe not as robust or something that's been disintegrated or fragmented due to combat operations. At least that's my perspective. Shane, you got anything on that?
Hey, I'll just bring up a quick point. This is just something we've talked about here within the battalion, but considering phase 0 operations and things that kind of we, the battalion and the companies are tied into, one of the things that we've discussed are just the potential for some subject matter expert exchanges, or the potential for bringing some folks from the 16th or other MP brigades, other MPs, down for or someplace for a subject matter expert exchange. Maybe something worth looking at as well. Over.
Hey, gentlemen, great segue, because one of the questions just came in was saying that this coordination should also take place at a joint level. And so there needs to be a mechanism in order to facilitate that. And perhaps that is at the COCOM or the TSOC level, where it's more of an operational competition sphere experience. And Colonel Myers, sir, to your point, that new Army force generation model seems a real opportunity for, because I know that, the MPs dominate the protection warfighting function, obviously, or play a large chunk in it. But there's also we all play a part in every single function. But again, because your core competencies are to, conduct investigations and do policing, et cetera, you've got to leverage information. And so I'm wondering if you think that perhaps the Army's going in that direction with this regionally aligned readiness. It's an admission that we need to deepen our understanding of these AOs before we go into it. It just recalls me when our conversation, when you're talking about that initial entry into Mosul, because at the beginning of the MP doctrine 3-39, there's General Dempsey there talking about, geez, it took 6 months to get police intelligence into the cycle. So I'm just wondering if the Army's with that new force generation model and the joint question, if you think that's a direction that we could be able to leverage. Over.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Ian. I mean, I'm not going to portray myself as a joint staff planner, right? But at the end of the day, it's still going to come down to force caps, what you can actually get into theater, and then what's the prioritized effort by type of force formation. For instance, if I need X number of 8 armored brigade combat teams, that sucks up a lot of stuff, their logistical trails. So at the end of the day, the planner's got to still go down and say, okay, what can I actually get, along MP, CA, or PSYOPs, for instance. And then I think it also goes back to the phase 0 question on what is in theater, TSOC wise, or, 95th, the PSYOPs groups that are actually in theater doing things to set conditions and shape things. And then how does that translate when you switch over to the LISCO environment as you bring forces in, what is doing swaps with what's already on ground, what is allowing those things on ground to, focus on the deep area, for instance, while the things coming in flow in over the tip fid to take in, maybe the close or, rear area, for lack of a better vernacular again, or the strategic lines of communication going back to the ports. That interplay as you go over sequencing over time and space at the theater level, I think would have the big considerations there. As far as actual specific functionality, it's still going to go down to what's on ground, feeding in those demand signals, and then what do we do to meet those demand signals, I think, without getting into the weeds on it. Over.
Hey, okay, good copy, sir. On that, so I just wanted to say that's a crime I just committed. I think I just dropped a concept that most of the people in the audience likely don't know. And it's just that the Army, this new force generation model, we're going to go to a little bit more regional alignment where people will stay focused on one area of the world as opposed to just being ready to go anywhere in the world at any given time. Of course, everyone's ready to go anywhere. However, you'll just have a deeper understanding or knowledge because there's going to be different equipment, training, knowledge, of course, that we'll need for those areas. So I just wanted to get that out there. And then, which leads me to, there was a question here, and I think as we touched on it with the joint question, and I'll put this to either of you gentlemen, because we both have, our branches have sizable reserve components. Where do you see the integration, or perhaps even you could put people on orders for temporary periods of time and incorporating them? We're using the Compo 2 and 3 with Compo 1 in order to get more of a mixed or understanding and application of skills during these training exercises, for example. Do we see that as a possibility, or are we just going to leave that active duty does this and reserves does this? Over.
Just from my perspective, go ahead, Shane. I'll follow up after you.
No, sorry about that, sir. I'll just tell you, Ian, that's an initiative that we've kind of started here. We had some folks from USA KPOC visit here last month, and it's something that we've started to talk about and kind of like walk through like the wickets on how we would go about getting that done, and what having them attached here and for how long. So we're definitely thinking about it. We're just trying to figure out what the right what the right way to do that is. So that's a good question.
Hey, just from our perspective, I mean, so many rotations for JRTC, NTC, and I'm sure JRMC not as much just because they're in Europe. They have Compo 2-3 MP units, and I'm sure some CA units, as we've found with 83rd trying to get down into JRTC rotations, that have to integrate with Compo 1. So that's an existing pathway right now. Just from my perspective and based on what we've been told, doctrinally CAC is looking at in terms of protection brigades, whatever ends up, if they have a Compo 1 slice, which they're looking at doing, kind of like the MEB started out with when they came out, but they've all shifted over into the Compo 3, there's going to be opportunities there as those things round out conceptually and then doctrinally and then get put on paper in a tow on what plugs them in. And it kind of goes back to the MCPOD concept for division and corps headquarter roundouts where you put in Compo 2-3 specific, subject matter experts or whatnot that go into a Compo 1 headquarters, and that headquarters deploy at a higher number than they maintain on the Compo 1 books. So those kind of things could be pathways. I know there's been discussions with removal of CA staff from the divisions in particular on what does that look like and what augmentation is necessary for a specific LISCO per theater on what they have to do to round out that headquarters to be competently postured in whatever skill set, even if it's just CA in this case, might be a way to go forward.
So that's great to hear. So, full disclosure, I started off as a National Guardsman and then slowly, incrementally, like one of those finger traps that never lets you go. And then here I am. It's good to hear that you're working on that integration as well, because definitely we look at applying reserves to similar, yet we apply them differently to the same problem sets in many ways. I see we got to pop up here. I want just one last question here before we take off, and it's that. And it's just about, I guess, the future and moving ahead. There were a couple of suggestions that perhaps there could be working groups established in because these huge warfighter or CTCs are sometimes few and far in between, about how to perhaps integrate better so we could build those neural networks, between different branches as we move forward. And then I just wanted to get to your gentlemen's thoughts on professional writing and where you encourage your troops to participate in events such as these, because this was inspired by a paper. And in fact, one of the big triggers for that original rotation was Captain Andrew Bibb. A hat tip to him. He may be listening, I'm not sure, but he wrote a paper about how CA should be, aligned for more of the reconnaissance piece. and hence the experiment started. And so there's one captain writing a well thought out article, and then an experiment tried, and because of that, a new formation resulted. So Colonel Salyer, I'll turn it over to you, and then we can go to Colonel Myers and then hand it over to the association.
No, hey, Ian, thanks. Hey, so as far as a way forward, discussing this potential concept and working together between civil affairs and military police, I wouldn't write off anything, and I'm open to suggestions. I'm very encouraged by it. Of course, our brigade headquarters is MP, but I would like to see further integration in anybody's ideas. I'd welcome that. So there's that. And, about professional writing, I absolutely encourage it. I think it really generated this discussion. And again, just recognize that this is the kind of the opening volley in this discussion, but there's a lot more to come. And I think that, kind of what generates that is more thought and more writing and just thought on this stuff. So I absolutely encourage it, and I'm happy about it. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo Shane's comments, I've always encouraged the battalion commander, kind of mandated select officers would compile one, sometimes against their will initially until they saw the value in it, submitting to, in our case, the MP Regimental Journal or other professional articles. It's a great thing. And it really goes back to almost the solarium concept under Eisenhower and the inner warriors between World War I and World War II, which really was trying to get at junior officers or mid-grade, field grade officers coming up with, examination of current operational or, Army problems that needed some kind of out of the box thinking and approach to kind of shake off, what is usually a bureaucratic lockstep approach to problem solving. So I think a lot of those kind of things, usually started off with somebody having an idea and maybe putting it into a professional journal. And you've probably seen a lot of it if you're, familiar with the field artillery journals or the other branch or maneuver centers of excellence journals on what is the contemporary problem set, and then how do we go with some kind of non-standard approach to at least get the conceptual ideas flowing. So I definitely encourage it.
Hey, gentlemen, thanks so much. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And I will attest to the fact that writing is definitely a painful experience. However, the payoff is, better understanding. And that's what we're here for. And especially the CA folks out there, that's what you're paid to do, understand the civil component. So, and that's one of the best methods in order to foster that. So with that, thank you very much, gentlemen. I'm going to hand it over to John McGilligan to take us to the end here. Thanks, John.
Major Duke, thank you for facilitating that great discussion. On behalf of the Civil Affairs Association, I want to thank Mr. Rick Harn of the Military Police Regimental Association, our president, retired Colonel Joe Carlson, and all of our speakers today. We had Major Mike Carlson, Major Chris Tuning, and Major Joshua David, who were the authors of the paper that we had linked in the chat. To look at that article and many others, go to the Civil Affairs website, which is civilaffairsassoc.org, and then check out the article they wrote in the Eunomia Journal. We encourage you to submit your own ideas, especially people who are at MP. Continue this conversation. Especially today, we want to thank Colonel Myers and Lieutenant Colonel Salyer. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time. We appreciate your input. And Major Duke, thanks for putting this together. Thanks for facilitating. So hope everyone has a great day. Great discussion again, and let's keep this going. Be safe, everyone, out here.